When you think about the people that you know who have been there for you when times are tough, maybe you've got one or two really good mates near the top of your list. In fact, maybe these friends have outlasted romantic relationships you've had. Maybe maybe they're actually a little bit more supportive of you than some members of your own family. Maybe these mates are more involved in your life than your own children. So, what about choosing a life with them instead of a life with others who have let you down? Could you choose your best friend as your life partner? Could you choose mateship over matrimony? Rachel Hannam is from North Brisbane Psychologists. And Rachel, you deal in couples therapy, but what do you know about couples who are mates rather than married?
Yeah, well, I haven't worked with too many best friends who live together who've come for therapy, I have to say. But examining friendships, particularly close long-term friendships, is a really interesting topic. And it's certainly a topic that comes up in the therapy room, as well as the friendship that exists between couples, because that's what we're talking about, right, is that sort of really solid long-term friendship.
Yeah, I mean, you hear terms like soulmates, best friends, kindred spirits, and it's quite normal to think about these connections in the context of a romantic relationship. But when you think about long-term monogamous relationships that fit the bill minus the romance, it's not something you hear much about. But as I understand, there are a growing number of people who are choosing their best friend over any romantic partner.
Yeah, I read something about that in the Sydney Morning Herald last week as well, and I can understand it in that deep platonic love can really create an environment of interdependence as well as freedom for people to pursue academic or creative aspirations. They can support each other in the same sort of ways that couples might, while not having perhaps the same extent of expectations. Yeah, I thought that was quite sweet when I read that article.
Let's talk about those expectations because, as I sort of understand, expectations and the weight of them can be one of the big problems that romantic couples grapple with. I guess in a sense you would help people adjust their psychological reaction to expectation. So if you have a psychological barrier towards choosing a friend over romance, how might you go about addressing that?
So choosing to live with a friend over a romantic partner.
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
that what you mean?
what would be the psychological barriers to a relationship like that, which doesn't easily fit a conventional norm? Certainly not in the way that we, would talk about a couple getting married and settling down. You wouldn't really hear about a couple of mates just settling down, minus the other stuff that goes along.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's not conventional, but I guess it certainly meets many of the same needs for support and connection and belonging and trust and safety. The article that I had read was about two women who'd lived together for 20 years. They had their own romantic relationships outside their cohabitation relationship. And I guess to answer your question, one of the reluctances might be that we've all been fed this romantic notion of marriage, and romanticism is still very much in our culture. And so there's a formula that children learn early on and that we carry through life, that we need to meet our lifelong partner, get married, have the white picket fence, have the two kids and the dog, and that's not how many people's lives go, of course. So if we can overcome those formulaic, deeply ingrained expectations and be open to the fact that relationships can take many forms and be mutually supportive and satisfying, then who knows what's possible.
ABC Radio Brisbane and Queensland is where you find yourself. 5 minutes to 2. My name is Kat, and Rachel Hannam from North Brisbane Psychologists is with you. We're talking about this idea of rejecting the romantic expression of monogamy and instead picking a platonic one, choosing your best mate over your romantic partner. Rachel, I just wonder, when I think about some of the big problems we face in Australia, challenges associated with housing, with aged care, with women who raised families, had a relationship breakdown, find themselves in their 60s with not much superannuation, no partner, and a real sense of stress or anxiety. Having a settled relationship with a very good friend, to the extent that you're even living together, seems to kind of address some of those problems. Why don't we hear more about it as an option?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. That's right. Mutual support, both financially and psychologically, a sense of community and care. I totally agree. I'm not an expert on housing or planning, but, I do believe there are some structural barriers in place, although I've heard stories of it happening more and more, and buildings being purpose-built for community living and co-housing. And a lot of women I know, as they're getting older, are dreaming of this idea of living with other women, other couples, and sharing the load and creating community. But I think, like I said before, we've still got very ingrained ideas of the nuclear family that would prevent some of that more cooperative living.
And if that conventional model works for you, all power to you, that's fantastic. If you're looking for an alternative, Rachel, but you do have this big expectation that you're grappling with, how can you start to, at a psychological level, unpick a bit of that programming?
Well, I think we need to look at the research on what makes for stable long-term relationships. And it's not sex and romance as we've traditionally been told to think. It's friendship, knowing each other, being known and knowing one another. It's sharing respect and admiration. It's connecting and taking a positive perspective with one another so that you support one another's self-esteem. It's the ability to manage conflict and support one another's individual dreams as well as shared dreams, and helping make those dreams or visions come true. So there's some of the key principles from the Gottman method of relationships therapy, which I practice, and all of those are applicable to family relationships, friendships, and other types of relationships. So I think if we can get a deeper understanding of platonic love and friendship and intimacy, then we can see the range of possibilities here.
To what extent might a romantic relationship interfere with friendship and vice versa? I mean, in some respects, it feels sometimes like you're asked to choose one or the other, and is so far as where you devote your time and energy, for example.
Well, I think it's good to start out the way you intend to continue. So the story that I read in the Sydney Morning Herald was about these best friends who'd had relationships outside the situation that they were living together, and it sounded like they managed expectations with each other as well as with their romantic partners around how they were going to spend their time and energy. I mean, we hear it a lot, don't we, that people get a new romantic partner and they ignore their friends and family, and in the end that never works out very well. So I think it is about being conscious of sharing your attention with the important people in your life, doing it very consciously, speaking about it early and upfront, and negotiating.
Very interesting, helpful things to consider. Thank you so much, Rachel. Really interesting conversation this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks, Kat.
Dr. Rachel Hannam from North Brisbane Psychologists on ABC Radio, Brisbane and Queensland.